Chapter 613 Submission. The Douluo Empire relied on a single soul tool to change the entire situation. They brought massive losses to Juzi. Not only did her soul engineer legions lose a third of their fighting strength, but even the 8 compression array soul tools were drained in the process of protecting them. That was also why they managed to minimize their losses. The generals that flew to Juzi's side were all pale green right now. Juzi gritted her teeth as she said, retreat. Although she knew that Douluo City would never be able to replicate such an attack, she had no choice right now. Although she had only seen them for a short time, she could accurately tell that the green shell's interference couldn't last forever. After the energy storm, they were already much weaker. They would disappear after some more time. More importantly, her troops' morale was very low due to what had happened. They were in no state to fight right now. If the city had a backup plan, it would be very difficult to deal with. A signal flare was set off into the sky. However, the Juga divine crossbow cannons also lit up at the same time. The stationary shells that Juzi was once eagerly waiting for rained down. They quickly engulfed the entire region. The 5 Beast Lord rank Soul Engineer legions, especially the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion, played a very big role at this point. The 300 Soul Engineers in the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion quickly dispersed under Juzi's orders. They turned into flashes of light and charged towards the ground. Every one of them shone brightly with more than 10 beams of light. They were using their individual strength to intercept the shells. Dazzling fireworks were set off in the sky. Bright lights flashed. Every time there was an explosion of light, one would feel very mesmerized. The other Beast Lord rank Soul Engineer legions also reacted. They couldn't be bothered to mourn the death of their compatriots now. They all joined in and helped to intercept the stationary shells. The war had gone on for a few years. Douluo City's reserves were limited too. After this attack, the Sun Moon Empire's Soul Engineer legions were finally out of their offensive range. However, they left behind more than 400 corpses too. Seeing that the Sun Moon Empire's Soul Engineers had retreated, everyone at the top of the city walls cheered. To the Sun Moon Empire, this was unprecedented. As for the Douluo Empire, this was an unprecedented victory too. Victory left everyone excited. Sun Zwen's face was even flashing. His stationary interference shells had proven to be effective after a live experience. The White Tiger Duke was also excited. The losses that they had caused the Sun Moon Empire were beyond his expectations. If only the protective barriers erected by the high-energy compression array soul tools weren't there. In that case, the Soul Engineer legions on the ground would have been wiped out. However, this was already good enough. Although Douluo City's reserves in terms of soul tools had been greatly depleted, it was important to know that there were many soul masters here. As long as there were stationary interference shells, they were still very significant. Terrifying explosions ensued in the sky. Every beam of light formed streaks of dazzling glow. The fight entered a stalemate. However, the battlefield was already a mess. The Soul Engineers who were caught in the energy storm wouldn't have survived. Not even their corpses were left. This was the brutality of a fight involving soul tools. Sun Moon Empire commander's tent. Juzi was pale green and silent for 15 minutes. After this, she gave out a series of orders. All the Class 9 Soul Engineers gathered in the commander's tent, including Kong Denning. We were unprepared this time. It must not happen again. Worshipped, we'll fight again tomorrow. Please be responsible for dealing with those interference shells. Tomorrow must not be like today. Juzi said to the Class 9 Soul Engineers. Kong Denning furrowed his brow and said, I hadn't expected the Douluo Empire to come up with such a soul tool. With those interference shells, our strength has indeed been greatly weakened. I've checked it out. Those interference undulations can last for more than 30 minutes. Even though it's not cheap to produce them, they are as powerful as Class 7 stationary shells. Given the Douluo Empire's ability, they can still produce them in batches. These shells are also able to cover a huge region. That's why we saw what happened earlier. If we want to avoid any interference, it's impossible as of now. Our linked soul tools will still be affected. The best option we have now is to use stationary soul tools. Juzi shook her head and replied, no, we have no time. Our research on stationary soul tools has dropped over the past few years. We won't have time to deploy enough stationary shells. We can only rely on our current strength. White Tiger Duke, I would really like to see if you can resist the Sun Moon Empire's army with those interference shells. Elder Kong, I'll need you to personally lead the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion. What do you think? Kong Denning nodded silently. The Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion was indeed very strong. However, there were still hidden problems behind this strength. Human-shaped soul tools had to be controlled using immense spiritual power. Given the current members of the Legion, this was impossible. How did the Legion possess such great strength then? It was because Kong Denning had invented a secret method, whereby life energy was drained as the price to pay. This helped to increase the Soul Engineer's spiritual power greatly. This was why the individual abilities of those Soul Engineers in the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion were in fact only about 5 or 6 rings. They were able to become as strong as 8 ring soul masters through human-shaped soul tools. However, the sacrifice was that their lives were much shorter than ordinary soul masters. None of them could live past 50. At the same time, they were also very arrogant because they were powerful, and their spiritual power had been overly enhanced. Unless one was powerful enough, he couldn't control this Legion. The true fighting strength of the Legion could only be unleashed under Kong Denning's control. This was even more important after the Sun Moon Empire lost their linked soul tools. Without linked soul tools, they had to fight with their absolute strength. Juzi didn't think that Douluo City could resist the Sun Moon Empire's army with those interference shells. After all, the Sun Moon Empire's overall abilities had grown too much over the past few years. The Empire had also greatly flaunted its military strength. It had more than 3 million soldiers now. More than 1 million of them had been thrown into this war. This was at least twice the number the Douluo Empire had. Furthermore, it had many Soul Engineer legions, soul tools and soul formations. Douluo City didn't stand any chance at all, unless the city had many more Class 9 shells. But that was impossible. Class 9 shells weren't so readily available. The night was silent. The excitement in Douluo City had long faded. Things were very busy in the city. Today marked an unprecedented victory for the Douluo Empire. However, everyone also knew what a victorious fight like this meant. It meant that the Empire now shared a deep enmity with the Sun Moon Empire. Once the war ended, no one would be spared. Given the circumstances they were in, everyone from the Douluo Empire was united. It was only by fighting to the death, along with interference shells, that they could possibly survive. This was their only chance. Shu Jiawei couldn't sleep for the entire night. Dai Hao couldn't sleep. Elder Sun couldn't sleep. When the first ray of sunlight shone from the east and bore down on Douluo City, the city was covered by a layer of gold. A signal from the Sun Moon Empire also sounded. After one afternoon and night of rest, the Sun Moon Empire's base was like a lion that had just awoken. That signal was like a lion's roar. It meant that the Sun Moon Empire was about to bare its sharp claws at Douluo City. The Sun Moon Empire's army didn't charge at Douluo City instantly. However, the entire base was moving. Looking over from Douluo City, it was clear that the army was tearing down their soul tool formations. This only meant two things. Either they were retreating, or they were going to attack. Standing at the top of the city wall, the White Tiger Duke appeared very grim. The Sun Moon Empire was obviously going to go all out. It was not going to retreat. The soul formations were being torn down so that they could be shifted forward. Douluo City was going to be attacked, and the soul formations were there to protect their Soul Engineer legions. Undoubtedly, the Sun Moon Empire was not going to show mercy. If all the soul formations were destroyed, the Sun Moon Empire would be in a disastrous situation. However, was that possible? A million-man army was moving together towards Douluo City. It was like a huge millstone was slowly turning, faster and faster. This millstone was about to grind Douluo City into powder. Now, the people in Douluo City had no choice. They could only prepare to fight. If they won, they might survive. However, if they lost, they were doomed. The powerful individuals from Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect were all at the top of the city wall by now. They were all at the northern side. This was the main battlefield. The 5 Soul Engineer legions from the hand that protects the nation were all gathered here. Without defeating these 5 Soul Engineer legions, they stood no chance at all. Originally, they didn't stand a chance anyway. However, the chance seemed to have come after the appearance of stationary interference shells. The low-pitched signals became louder and louder as the sun shone brighter, and after the Sun Moon Empire's army left behind some troops, they began to slowly but steadily inch their way closer to Douluo City. Shu Jiawei personally came to the top of the city wall. He stood beside the White Tiger Duke. Shu Jiawei smiled and asked, Dai Hao, did you know? I once feared you. The White Tiger Duke smiled. Of course I know that. Otherwise, why do you think I was always at the western border? Given my contributions, I should have been the marshal of the 3 armies. Isn't that so? Shu Jiawei sighed and said, yes, I was jealous of you. I'm not fit to be the leader of an empire. The White Tiger Duke shook his head and retorted, you can't say that. It's just a psychological thing. Whenever an emperor meets an official like me, I'm afraid that'll usually be the reaction. Shu Jiawei laughed. Perhaps. I didn't expect to have the chance to fight alongside you. Do you know how I feel now? I feel honored. The White Tiger Duke couldn't help but laugh heartily. Me too. Shu Zhou's eyes brightened. Let those Sun Moon Empire bastards come. I really want to see if my city falls first, or if the Sun Moon soldiers' blood will run dry. The 5 Sol Engineer legions slowly separated. In the sky, all types of aerial surveillance Sol tools were slowly moving forward. On the ground, the remaining Sol Engineer legions reorganized themselves. They managed to form 6 full Sol Engineer legions. Of course, this was only on the northern side. In the other 3 directions, there were still other Sol Engineer legions moving along with the soldiers. They were ready to construct Sol formations. The Sun Moon Empire's strategy was very simple. It was to construct Sol formations that were within the effective range of Douluo City. However, it was such a simple strategy that was the most deadly at this point. This was because the destructiveness of those Sol formations could be relied on once they were fully built. While Douluo City could disrupt the linked attacks and defenses of the Sun Moon Empire, it might still be unable to handle the strength of the Sol formations. The only thing worth celebrating was that the high energy compression array Sol tools were drained the previous day. At least they couldn't be used in the short term. Prepare the Juga Divine crossbow cannons and stationary interference shells. Fire the Juga Divine crossbow cannons. As the White Tiger Duke shouted, Douluo City seemed to have become a huge porcupine that shot out all its spikes. Suddenly, an uncountable number of shells was flung towards the Sun Moon Empire's army. This time, the White Tiger Duke didn't use the stationary interference shells immediately. They were very limited. After knowing that they had these shells, the enemy would most certainly try to intercept them if they used them again. Daihao was well aware that the Class 9 Sol Engineers among those Sol Engineer legions were surely well prepared. They were going to be responsible for dealing with the stationary interference shells. This was why he needed to be invested in the fight right from the beginning. The Sol Engineers immediately erected linked defensive barriers. Without the presence of stationary interference shells, these linked defensive barriers were impenetrable on the battlefield. It was a pity that they only lasted for an instant. Green halos silently spread and quickly engulfed the entire battlefield. Kong Deming, who was at the front of the Sun Moon Imperial Sol Engineer Legion, revealed an astonished look on his face. What a cunning fellow! As the godfather of all Class 9 Sol Engineers, he immediately knew that he had been tricked. The last time the stationary interference shells were fired, they had released jade green light. They were very obvious on the battlefield, as if they were fireworks. This time, these shells were fired without any warning. Obviously, those shells didn't have to release jade green light. Clearly, they only appeared that way the other time because it was an intentional ploy by the Douluo Empire. This time, the Empire had exploited the Sun Moon Empire's intention to intercept their interference's shell, misleading the Sun Moon Empire. The stationary interference shells were planted among the other stationary shells and fired with the Juga Divine crossbow cannons. Immediately, an unexpected effect was achieved. The aerial surveillance and linked Sol tools immediately became useless. Whether it was Juzi or Kong Deming, they couldn't help but be impressed. On the Tang Clan side, Bei, Hikaetu and Shu Sanchi were gathered. They laughed sinisterly. This idea didn't come from the White Tiger Duke, but the 3 of them, as Sun Wen was the one who had researched stationary interference shells. The person who was truly responsible for the production and use of these shells was the current Vice Hallmaster of the Tang Clan Sol Tool Hall, Hikaetu. The White Tiger Duke smiled before turning around and giving a thumbs up to Hikaetu. If Douluo City wanted to resist the Sun Moon Empire, its interference shells had to be effective first. If the linked Sol tools couldn't be stopped, everything else was useless. First, second, third and fourth Sol Engineer legions, attack. The White Tiger Duke shouted. After this, he drew a long sword from his waist and pointed his sharp sword in the direction of the Sun Moon Empire's army. Figure after figure rose. They turned into flowing lights and charged towards the Sun Moon Empire's army. Exploiting one's strength was an important element in war. The only strength that the Douluo Empire possessed was their Soul Masters. When these figures flew out, a low-pitched roar sounded in the air. It was so loud that it seemed as if thunder was booming. A giant yellow projection appeared. This projection was almost 1,000 meters long. It was huge, as if it were a giant ball. It was Elderson's martial soul true body, the Tatty Godly Bull. The figures all steadily landed on the Tatty Godly Bull's body. There were a few thousand of them. The Godly Bull's figure flashed in the sky as he charged towards the Sun Moon Empire's Sol Engineer legions. It was a life and death fight. There was no retreat for either party. This was the same for Shrek Academy. To win this fight, both parties didn't just need to combine their abilities. They also had to combine their strategies. The White Tiger Duke was relying on miracle soldiers today. This wasn't his usual style. He was normally very honest and open with his strategy. However, he had no choice but to rely on these miracle soldiers now, considering that the Douluo Empire couldn't challenge the Sun Moon Empire openly. As an ingenious military commander, he was equally as strong even if he used miracle soldiers. The first wave of miracle soldiers were the stationary interference shells. In that case, the second wave of miracle soldiers were these 4 Soul Master legions. These 4 Soul Engineer legions were led by powerful individuals from Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect. They were here to defeat the 5 Soul Engineer legions from the hand that protects the nation. The Douluo Empire only stood a chance of victory if it defeated these 5 Soul Engineer legions. Juzi was no longer in the commander's tent by now. Although she had set up measures to prevent the stationary interference shells from landing, Douluo City would most certainly resort to any method to maximize their effects. Otherwise, there would be no fight to speak of. However, Juzi didn't expect their soul tools to be disrupted so easily. However, all this wasn't important anymore. The important thing was the head-on clash that was about to occur. Seeing that the Tatty Godly Bull was close to the Sun Moon Imperial Sol Engineer Legion, a ball of intense silver light was suddenly unleashed. Silver light suddenly shone, forming a huge light barrier. This barrier engulfed the Tatty Godly Bull. It was important to realize the size of the Tatty Godly Bull. There were even a few thousand Soul Masters on top of him. He was actually contained by that ball of silver light. Even linked Soul tools didn't seem to be so strong. Elder Sun was an ultimate Douluo. A silver moon suddenly rose into the sky. Suddenly, sunlight disappeared from the sky. As the silver moon rose, the barrier shone along with it. Elder Sun's ferocious charge was stopped just like that. Sun Swen lost his voice as he shouted from the top of the city wall. Silver Moon Douluo. It's Elder Kong. It's Elder Kong. As he mentioned the words Elder Kong, his expression greatly changed. His face was actually filled with fear right now. Yes, it was fear. Sun Swen, who was normally so fearless, was actually terrified now. Suddenly, countless rays of light shot towards the Tatty Godly Bull. Although it wasn't a linked attack, the combined strength of an attack by more than 1,000 Soul Engineers was still terrifying. As an ultimate Douluo, Elder Sun's horns shone brightly with yellow light. He was struggling to break free from the silver barrier. However, the silver light was like sticky candy. He could stretch the light as much as he could, but he still couldn't break out from it. All the Soul Masters also demonstrated their powers within the barrier. They were attacking the barrier furiously, but none of them escaped. On Douluo City's walls, Sun Swen was dazed as he looked at this scene. He has succeeded. He has actually succeeded. Elder Kong is now a Class 10 Soul Engineer. He has fused his transcendent Douluo abilities into his soul tools. This was the natal soul tool that he mentioned once before. That is, he has fused his most powerful soul tool with his own martial soul by tapping into the power of heaven and earth. Silver Moon Divine Light Barrier. The Death God Pagoda is like a joke in front of this Silver Moon Divine Light Barrier. They could only defend, but couldn't attack. The Tatty Godly Bull and the thousands of Soul Masters were now target boards for the Sun Moon Empire. With the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion leading them, the 5 Soul Engineer Legions from the hand that protects the nation quickly gathered. They unleashed an all-out attack. On the ground, the Soul Engineers that were charging forward also quickly constructed soul formations. They then used the powerful attacks from their soul formations against the Godly Tatty Bull. The Soul Masters on the Godly Tatty Bull could only rely on their own individual strength to resist the attacks. However, they couldn't retaliate. Suddenly, they were all in a disadvantageous position. This was even after their linked soul tools were disrupted. Otherwise, the Douluo Empire would have incurred huge casualties by now if the Sun Moon Empire's Soul Engineer Legions used their linked attacks. The White Tiger Duke was very grim now. This silver barrier had never appeared on the battlefield before. The Douluo Empire wasn't the only one who had a trump card. The Sun Moon Empire had a trump card too. It was thousands of years of soul tool technology. This was finally demonstrated now. Elder Sun couldn't protect everyone by himself. Some of the weaker Soul Masters were already starting to die. This was also Elder Sun's first time facing such a situation. He roared furiously, and the yellow light emanating from his body became more and more intense. To the others, it was only a silver barrier. However, as an ultimate Douluo, he fully understood that this silver light tapped into spatial power. It didn't tap into the strength of the moon. Most of the attacks unleashed by him and the other Soul Masters were hitting nothing. Otherwise, even a Class 12 soul tool would have collapsed, given the magnitude of their attacks. Spatial power. Elderson roared, and his horn slowly turned silver. Above him, a ball of glaring silver light slowly surfaced. Around this ball of silver light was a black halo. It was obviously space that had been torn open. When Kong Deming saw this, he sighed in his heart. It's a pity that he discovered it so soon. It's really a pity. If there wasn't an ultimate Douluo who could control spatial power, I could have killed many more soul masters using my silver moon divine light barrier. As Elder Kong waved his hand, the sky shone brightly. The barrier slowly dissipated just before Elderson attacked. However, the external attacks didn't cease. Elder Kong didn't intend to use his barrier to trap them all. He just needed to build momentum. Beam after beam of light shot out from the towdy godly ball. A huge golden dragon charged into the sky. Countless beams of light bore down, and the closest soul engineers from the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion had no choice but to raise protective barriers and cease their attacks temporarily. Radiant Holy Dragon True Body. It was Bei Bei. Countless turtle shells opened up, forming a massive shield in the sky that blocked the oncoming attacks. Many beams of light were also refracted away. The surface of the turtle shell was shining bright gold. A giant snake was moving around on it. Its blood-red eyes were glaring at its enemies, as if it was choosing who to devour. It was the Swanwu shield of the eternal defense, Shu Sanchi. Balls of light exploded in the sky, accurately intercepting all types of attacks within a 100-meter radius. It was a man that was completely hidden in thick armor. His entire body was covered in all types of soul tools, including barrels that fired soul rays. Destructive rays were being shot everywhere. All the heavy attacks were blocked. Origin of destruction, Hikeitu. A pinkish red snake revealed itself in the sky. A dim golden halo was supporting it and covering some of the weaker soul masters. An invincible golden body was unleashed by a soft tendon python. It was the wild demon soft rabbit, Jang Nanan. The sound of a flute resonated in the air. 9 phoenixes rose into the sky, all flashing with different colors. Whatever attack struck them instantly penetrated them. Wherever they passed, all the attacks deviated from their original trajectories. It was the flute cauldron Douluo, Mina Phoenix worshipping flute, Xiao Xiao. 12 wings fluttered over. A huge angel descended, and layers of holy light surfaced. Whenever they were on a soul master's body, they offered them a golden ring of protection. It was the angel Douluo, Yi Gu Yi. A giant, pinkish dragon opened up in the sky. Pinkish halos spread from its body. Any attack that touched these pinkish halos was instantly destroyed. It was the ruby dragon true body of the ruby Douluo, Nankyu Kaiu. A long beam of sword light shot up, and a 100-meter long blade appeared. A member of the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion was killed by this beam of sword light. It was the sword fanatic Douluo, Ji Juiken, and his judgment sword. Yes, they came from the Tang Sect. They were the current 8 titled Douluo of the Tang Sect. In 3 years, they all became titled Douluo as they cultivated tirelessly, and after they consumed the spiritual pill, all of them were very strong now. Right now, they were the pillars of the Tang Sect. They were also the faces of the younger generation of Shrek. However, the strongest 2 weren't here. Otherwise, if all 10 powerful Douluo were here, the Tang Sect's ultimate strength would be fully demonstrated. Apart from them, the titled Douluo from Shrek Academy, the Dalu Empire, the Doling Empire, and the Heavenly Soul Empire all demonstrated their abilities too. They flew in all directions from the towdy godly bull's back. Figure after figure emanated dazzling lights from their bodies. Not only did they resist the attacks that were fired at them, but they even leapt towards the soul engineers. The biggest advantage that soul engineers possessed were linked soul tools. After that, it was distance. If they could close the distance, soul masters would surely be unafraid of soul engineers. However, that was easier said than done. Even with titled Douluo in front, many soul masters still perished from the attacks. The 4,000 who went with Elderson were all elites among soul masters. They each had to possess at least 5 rings. Those with less than 7 rings relied on flying type soul tools. Some of those above 7 rings did so too. Only those who were adept at flying relied on their own strength to remain in the air. Given this circumstance, falling from the sky meant death. The fight in the sky immediately became unprecedentedly intense. From Douluo City, Juga divine crossbow cannons were furiously making sounds. Beams of light were continuously being fired. At the same time, the city gates at the front of Douluo City opened. Giant figures started to appear on the city wall. They were climbing out using their long legs as rapidly as possible. It was Shrek City's Fort Soul Engineer Legion. After many years of strengthening, the Fort Soul Engineer Legion was much stronger than before. Every all-terrain self-driving fort was as strong as a class 7 soul tool. 3 soul engineers drove 1 fort. Now, the entire legion had a total of 500 self-driving forts. They coordinated with the cannons on the city walls and quickly ventured out. They were charging towards the soul formations on the ground. Their job was to destroy them. Otherwise, it would be a catastrophic disaster if the soul formations were allowed to be fully constructed. Not only was the Fort Soul Engineer Legion unleashed, but the Tang Sect Soul Engineer Legion joined in too. 300 figures rose above the city wall. The reason why they didn't appear at the start was because they currently formed the greatest fighting strength out of all the soul engineer legions. After 3 years of training, the individual fighting strength of each soul engineer in the Tang Sect Soul Engineer Legion had greatly increased. They were all equipped with the best soul tools in the Tang Sect. In the Douluo Empire, the Tang Sect Soul Engineer Legion was the only force capable of challenging the Sun Moon Empire's 5 soul engineers in the hand that protects the nation. Of course, this referred to the beastful of ranked soul engineer legions. Compared to the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legions, they were still some ways off. Ordinary soldiers were already useless on the battlefield. They were only assisting the soul formations on the Sun Moon Empire's side. As for Douluo City, the ordinary soldiers were responsible for moving supplies. Everyone knew that this fight was critical to the final outcome of the war. Nothing else mattered. The White Tiger Duke kept giving commands. At the top of the city walls, all types of soul tools were raining as much fire down as they could. The fight in the other 3 directions of Douluo City had already begun. However, at this moment, the White Tiger Duke could only be bothered with the front. It was the most important direction. The other 3 directions were more miscellaneous. There were only a few stationary interference shells and linked defensive barriers used in those 3 directions. At the front, many stationary interference shells were used to keep their enemies from using linked soul tools. This was why the Douluo Empire didn't use its own linked soul tools either. As for the other 3 directions, there weren't enough people to launch linked attacks. However, linked defenses were still used to stabilize the situation. The White Tiger Duke was taking a gamble. He had no choice. He had too few trump cards in hand. He could only choose to lay all of them out on the battlefield now. This was the only way he could win. The situation on the battlefield was very tragic. Juzi was watching from behind. Of course, she knew that all of them came from Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect. She was even more conflicted now. It was important to know that there were still 2 more people who had yet to appear on the battlefield. With stationary interference shells, they were capable of changing the situation of the entire fight. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.